At this exact moment, 50 years ago today, I was arrested, um, charged with 2 counts of selling psychedelics, and it was under the Rockefeller Drug Laws, and I went to prison with a sentence of 1 year to life. Um, that was obviously a life-changing day, and I don't normally go on Thursday nights, but I want to be on at the exact moment that the arrest happened. It happened at 6:45 p.m. Eastern Time, December 4th, 1975. So I don't want to let the day go by without commemorating it. I'm not celebrating it, although if you watch the conversation I'm about to play, there is some cause for celebration in all this because it changed my life in a way at a time when my life really needed changing. So I'm going to pause once or twice to comment, but for the most part, I'm just going to play the edited version. Yesterday, I had Ellen from Queens, who I know since college, and so she knew me back in the day when all this happened, and Peach, who a bit camera shy, that middle frame where you just see snow on the outside. That's Peach, not coming on camera, but her voice contributed a lot to the conversation. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start that. And let me share my screen. And here it is. And this was recorded yesterday. And I am grateful to all who participated. So here we go.
Changed her life. And Ellen was there to witness that. And so I'd like to talk to you about that. First of all, Michael, tell us what happened on December 4th.
It was December 4th, 1975.
75.
And one of the reasons I want to do this is because December 4th, 2025 is the 50-year, for lack of a better word, anniversary of that event. Although we tend to celebrate anniversaries, I want to just recognize this one. Thursday before finals week of my final semester at Albany State University, things were spinning extremely, extremely out of control. I owed out a lot more money than I was capable of covering. And I had a shipment coming up from New York City. And, if we go to the backstory, at that stage, I was wholesaling. I was buying by the thousand or at that point, the several thousand, 4,000 to 10,000, and selling them by the hundred. Whereas before I would buy 100 and kind of share them with my friends and toss hits around the dorms in Albany. So how I went from retail to wholesale was a big step that we'll talk about in another section. But by December 4th, I was totally wholesaling. I was in huge gambling trouble. And somebody was coming up with 4,000 hits on the train, getting off at Rensselaer Station. I was supposed to pick him up. At the train station, I said to him, I have all of this sold. Just, either wait here, grab a motel, and I'll bring the money back to you, or get on the train back to New York, and I'll send somebody down with the cash. In any case, he didn't feel comfortable literally letting go of it. So he had 4,000 microdot LSD hits in a backgammon case of all things in his lap when I picked him up at the train station. So we're driving back through Albany, and we're listening to The Worst of the Jefferson Airplane on my cassette recorder in my car. And we got to my house at 171 North Allen Street, and there was always tons of parking. So we're getting close to my house, and White Rabbit's on there, and we're singing along with White Rabbit.
Oh my God.
And
really?
There was no parking. Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
There was no parking in front of the house. Get to my house, there's no parking. And the white knight is talking backwards. And I'm like, okay, I'll make a U-turn. So I make a U-turn, and there was a couple of spots across the street. So I parked the car, and Grace Slick's voice is getting higher and higher as she modulates. And without even saying a word, we both knew nobody's getting out of the car until feed your head is over, and the song is done. And I wrote a story about this called Stay Till the Song Is Over. We got out of the car, and I see a guy in a hoodie walking towards me. And then the guy in the hoodie walking towards me started running towards me. And I'm like, oh shit, we're getting robbed. And he pulls out a gun. So
Oh,
I wanted to say run, but I only got as far as ruh when the guy said state police freeze. And at that moment, all those cars taking up all those parking spots emptied like clown cars at a circus. There were humans everywhere running around the street. They kicked my door down, and I remember my front door falling over like alfalfa in a Little Rascals video, fainting. And they handcuffed me. I don't remember when they read me my rights. At some point they did.
Oh.
They dragged me to the house, and I remember seeing Harry Wong, who Stephanie's never met, but I believe you should remember Harry.
I don't know.
Yeah. Harry, Giuseppe, and I were sharing that house.
Oh,
And Harry, Giuseppe, and I are the ones who went to the hot tuna concert that I'll talk about later in the video.
that's your tagline.
Because like so many things in life, all this started because of a hot tuna concert.
Yes.
So Harry had a gun pointed to his head. Harry was a shell-shocked Vietnam veteran with a metal plate in his head. He was a 29-year-old freshman in Albany after being badly wounded in Vietnam. So they have a gun to Harry's head, and Harry knew very little about he knew, in the abstract that I was dealing, but he didn't know the specifics or how serious it was. So I said to the cop, Harry had nothing to do with this. Don't point a gun at him. But they just kept shoving me into the house. And then they started laughing among themselves. Oh, yeah, Harry had nothing to do with this. Giuseppe wasn't there. Phone was ringing, and the cops kept answering the phone. And whoever was calling, yeah, come on over. I did have people coming over because I had 4,000 hits of acid coming in. Every one of them was pre-sold. So all my customers were coming by, and the plan was, get the cash together, pay for the product, have enough left over to pay my bookmaker or partly pay him, and go on to the next thing. We had a pinball machine in my living room, and the cops playing. There's a couple of state troopers playing on my pinball machine, and they shoved me down into a chair in the living room, and I'm sitting in the chair, and there's a cop sitting on the armrest, and all I could do was try to be funny. There was nothing, it was like my entire world, my entire reality changed in an instant. I mean, I can relate it I can equate it maybe with having a really, really bad car accident where all of a sudden everything you thought mattered doesn't matter anymore. What matters now is this. So they're tearing the house apart. They're playing pinball on my pinball machine. I got a cop sitting on the arm of the chair that I'm sitting on, and I look up to him and I said, "Excuse me, officer, would you mind telling me what's happening here?" Like butter come out my mouth, innocent. And he goes, "Shut up, you're in a lot of trouble." And I said, "Well, I kind of figured out that I'm in some kind of trouble, but there's like 5 years worth of trouble and there's 20 years worth of trouble. You know what I mean?" And he goes, "It's a lot closer to 20. Shut up." So I got this fake contemplative look on my face, like I'm thinking, I looked back up at the cop. I said, and I'm handcuffed. I said, "Tell you what, I'll play your best trooper pinball for 5 years off my sentence, and you can leave the cuffs on." And that's where it was. I just kind of, this was too much. It was like, it was too much for me to deal with. I consciously left my body and was looking down at the whole thing, and left what was left with just somebody who can crack stupid jokes. But meanwhile, the real me, whatever that was off in the clouds somewhere.
Yeah, well, you were in shock, I'm sure.
Yeah. And so they tore apart my house, found most of what I had. A couple of days before, Wacky and I, and you remember Wacky, I'm sure, Ellen. Wacky was a big coke hound, and I would take a snort here and there. I was never really particularly enthralled by coke. So Wacky and I had split a gram of coke, and we didn't finish it, which is kind of amazing because Wacky finished everything in front of him. But we had like a third of a gram left, and we were done for the night. And he didn't trust himself to hold on to it, but he knew I wouldn't snort it. So remember those old olive-colored ski parkas that everybody wore.
Yeah.
Back in the day. So that was my winter coat. And on the sleeve, there was a little zipper pocket. I guess it was for lift tickets or something. So I put the cocaine into my lift ticket pocket. So anyway, they put us in the paddy wagon. So I'm locked up. And, well, first of all, the night that I got arrested, they take me down to headquarters. I get the good cop, bad cop treatment. The good cop is telling me, listen, we're not interested in you. We just want to know where the lab is. They're doing the I'm the low life street person they're trying to get. You've seen enough police dramas that and then I'm like, and I'm like treading the line here. I'm like, I don't want to piss the cops off, but I also don't want to tell them anything. So I'm like, all due respect, I think this is the part where I ask for a lawyer. And the cops dialed my phone. Hey, greetings. Again, I'm replaying what was recorded yesterday. Again, thank you, Ellen from Queens, and PJ for participating. I was given the good cop, bad cop treatment, but what the bad cop said was so disgusting, and I want to keep this at least a PG-13. So I edited out his comment, but suffice to say, the bad cop painted a very, very bad picture of what I might expect were I go to state prison. My house phone number. My mother answered the phone.
Oh my God, that's the part I was thinking about.
Oh, it's hard to think about this. It really is. It's officer whoever from the state police. We have your son here. She's like, what's going on? And she said, and they said he's accused of selling LSD. We have indictments. We have 2 sealed indictments on him, November 3rd, November 5th. And my mother's like, put him on the phone. So I get on. She goes, is it true? And I'm like, Mom, I don't think we should talk about it right now. Can you please just get me a lawyer? When the guy said state police freeze, my first thought was, I can't hide this from my parents anymore.
Oh gosh.
And that's the thing also, Stephanie, this was like a whole cover up. But anyway, he was like doing this whole thing. He was just carrying this whole thing himself, and he was trying to handle it himself. And I was thinking about how, as it got more and more intense, he was just really out there. Without any kind of, he couldn't tell anybody. He didn't tell anybody. And how much can you fix of it yourself? He actually couldn't fix any of it himself.
Right. I mean, it's true addiction being caught in that vicious cycle. Yeah.
And I thought it was a monetary problem, but it really was an addiction problem.
Yeah.
I'm from a family of gamblers. Ellen, you probably remember the stories about my uncles. The excess money I earned in the library, I used to buy U.S. savings bonds. I'd walk to 86th Street and 19th Avenue to the Dime Savings Bank, and any extra cash I had, I'd buy a $25 bond. And I accumulated $300 worth of savings bonds. Well, one day, a high school friend of mine, Alan Axelrod, had this divide because we again. Oh, so backing up again, my parents would talk to their friends about me at the track. And I'd hear the friends warning them, well, you don't want to get Michael at the track, get him all excited about gambling. What about your brothers? And I remember my mother's answer, Michael is too smart to become a compulsive gambler.
Oh my God.
And I love and miss my mother, but she didn't get it. It's not an intellectual situation.
She was in denial. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, in my neighborhood, 4 years old, we're playing marbles in front of the house for keeps. We're flipping baseball cards for keeps.
Yeah, Bensonhurst was like that. It was a very gambling driven.
It really was. Gambling was everywhere growing up.
Yeah.
I had my uncle's blood in me, pitching pennies, which became pitching nickels. The closest to the wall wins all the nickels or whatever. Playing blackjack in the hallways with the Italian kids. So anyway, I accumulate $300 worth of bonds. I loved the racetrack. I really did. By the time I'm 17, 18, 19 years old, I just loved the track. I'd go there and try to talk adults. The way kids would go to the liquor stores and get adults to buy beer for them, I was at the track getting adults to make bets for me because I was too young to bet.
Wow.
my friend Alan Axelrod got this slide rule called the Kelco calculator. It's supposed to handicapped horse racing. And I took a look at it and I went over anyway, I cracked the formula. It took me like an hour to figure out. You don't need a slide rule. All you need is this equation. I go to the track, Belmont Park. I took the Long Island Railroad. I took the subway to downtown Brooklyn, Flatbush, and Atlantic. Got on the Long Island Railroad to Belmont Park. I won $50. This was the summer after freshman year. And I'm like, whoa, $50 is a lot of money, 1972. I went again a couple of days later. I won $50 again. Now I'm a genius. I got it. I have cracked the code. I am the Kelco master. I know how to beat the track. So I go again. I lost. I'm like, oh, okay. Speed bump. I go again. I lost again. So now I've lost the $100 that I won and the money I started with. But I know that this Kelco system can beat the horses at Belmont Park. So I cashed a couple of the savings bonds. Now, my mother knew I had $300 worth of bonds, and she knew where I kept them. I cashed a couple of the bonds. I go back to the track. I lose. Well, now I'm like, and again, this is on the topic of me trying to work things out for myself and not talking to anybody. And I need to also mention this as background information. When my parents dropped me off on Dutch Quad in Stuyvesant Tower, freshman year, the last words my mother said as they left me in my dorm room were, and I quote, "And if I find out that you even associate with anybody who smokes pot, I will disown you." So that was my mother being hyperbolic, and I know that now. But at the time, I took it seriously. So any involvement with anything, she wasn't going to find out about it. So I'm missing a couple of bonds, and I don't want. At that point, my parents were legitimately very uptight about my gambling. I didn't want my parents to know that I had lost a couple of bonds. So I cashed a couple more bonds, and I went back to the track and lost them. And long story short, I had cashed half the bonds. So now I'm missing $150 worth of bonds. I don't want my parents to know I've been gambling. So I was like, okay, well, I'm missing half the bonds. I went to the Dime Savings Bank. I cashed the other half of the bonds and put it all on one horse for show, which means all that had to come in was first, second, or third, and I would have won. Well, of course, the horse came in fourth. I've lost all the bonds, and all I could do is hope now that my mother doesn't look in the drawer where the bonds are supposed to be. And then I went to the movies. There was a movie playing in the Deluxe Theater called Cisco Pike, starring Chris Christopherson, Gene Hackman, and a cameo appearance of playing the part of a low-life drug dealer by Wavy Gravy, Hugh Romney, which is ironic because I had no idea who he was or anything. It's just a character in the movie. Anyway, the point is, Chris Christopherson played a good guy pot dealer who was trying to retire. And Gene Hackman was a corrupt cop who owed a bunch of money and basically blackmailed Chris Christopherson into unretiring and dealing pot again. And the whole movie played out, there's violence and, the whole thing. What I gleaned from that movie was not all pot dealers are bad guys. You can maintain a moral code and still deal weed. So I went back to Albany for the beginning of sophomore year. I went to the weed dealer in my dorm and said, "Hey, I want to buy a key," because I'd seen the movie and they were talking about keys for kilos. And the guy starts laughing at me. He goes, "What do you want, a pound?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, a pound." So he sells me a pound, $200 for a pound. Anyway, I started dealing the weed. People were selling that old Mexican for like $20, $25 an ounce. I'm selling it for $18 an ounce. I'm undercutting the other dealers and still making a profit, all with an eye towards purchasing $300 worth of bonds. For the purpose of buying $300 worth of bonds and putting them back in the drawer so my mother never finds out that I was gambling. Of course, I never did buy the bonds. I just kept going to the track. I'm playing cards in the dorm, playing card games. Now I'm playing a bigger card game. I'm losing. I'm going to the track. I'm losing. I'm dealing. This goes on for a couple of years. Meanwhile, I knew that I had, and I'm not going to tell this whole long story, but I had $5,000 in trust for me when I turned 21. So I started borrowing against that to keep my lifestyle going in Albany. And by the time I turned 21 in March of 1975, I owed about $8,000 on the $5,000 that was coming. So I got the $5,000 out of the bank, went down to the bank and got it out, paid off debts, but still was in debt, still a few $1,000s in debt. And then Hot Tuna played in Binghamton, New York, with David Bromberg opening. And I wanted to go see David Bromberg, but Harry and Giuseppe really wanted to go see Hot Tuna. I didn't know who Hot Tuna really was. I thought I knew they had a fiddle player, Papa John. I thought there was some kind of country band, whatever. Didn't realize they were offshoots of the Jefferson Airplane. And Harry and Giuseppe were like, "Oh yeah, Hot Tuna's great. You'll love him. We got a trip for the show. Let's get a few hits." Well, Albany was dry. There wasn't a hit of acid to be found anywhere. And by the time that had come around, I was kind of the guy, the friend that friends came to, because I would buy 100 at a time, and to sell, buy 100 for like 100, and sell the hits for $2 a piece, and eat a whole bunch for myself. Nothing, way under the radar, nothing to be concerned about. So Hot Tuna plays Binghamton, and there was no acid to be had anywhere in Albany. So I made a phone call to a friend in Brooklyn, but he said the fatal words, because I said, "I need 3 hits for Hot Tuna. I'm willing to come down to Brooklyn and pick them up." He said, "Oh yeah, I have plenty of acid, but the minimum I'll sell you is 1,000 hits." And I'm like, "I don't need 1,000 hits. I need 3. Harry and Giuseppe really wanted the trip for the show, and they had me convinced that I wanted to also. So I drive down to Brooklyn. I buy the 1,000. We drive to Binghamton. We see the show. Bromberg was great. And Hot Tuna was amazing. And we were all, really, I think we must have spent the night in Binghamton, because I don't recall driving home in that state. But I got home, and within a week, the other 997 hits were sold, and I made hundreds of dollars. I'm like, holy shit. Like, talk about supply and demand. I got a Brooklyn connection. I got a huge demand here in Albany. And I'm not really noticing that a lot of the hits aren't going to fellow students. They're going to friends of people I worked with at Walt Subs. Remember Walt Subs? I used to deliver to the campus for Walt Subs. I probably delivered to you at some point. And so people I worked with had friends who lived in townies, and they were becoming my customers, and they were buying hundreds at a time. So now I was actually wholesaling to local people. And one day,
and that was me crossing a line. And again, I'm not, please don't glean from this that I'm trying to glorify dealing psychedelics, nor am I trying to glorify using psychedelics. I do believe it's an individual choice. I do think that LSD in particular is something very powerful and should only be in the right hands. It's dangerous in the wrong hands. In the right hands, though, people can make positive strides on their insights. So the thing of it was, when I was tossing a few hits around in the dorms with people that I knew and people that I was taking it with, that was one thing. But once I started wholesaling to the townies in Albany, I had no control over where things were going. So the effect of having that extra 997 hits, I can't overemphasize that it turned me from a retailer to a wholesaler. I want to emphasize one more thing, because Ellen mentioned earlier that I was kind of alone in this, trying to solve it myself. I couldn't tell the truth. After my mother's comment when she dropped me off at the dorms, and especially knowing just how uptight my parents were about my gambling, not only was I terrified about the $300 of missing bonds, I was really terrified about having withdrawn the $5,000 from the trust account, and dreading the moment when they'd ask me about where the money was. So I was desperately trying to put everything back. So my
cautionary tale that I drew from this, and again, none of this is to indict my parents. They did the best they could. You know, they were a different generation, and they thought and felt the way they did, and they did the best they could. My dad worked his ass off to send me in college, and my mother, for all her mishigas, she was a loving mother. But I didn't feel like I could tell the truth to them. So when I became a parent and started raising my kids, and I was a single parent for most of their childhoods, one thing I really emphasized was the truth. And telling me the truth isn't about me trusting my children. My children telling me the truth is about my children trusting me. So again, if you're a parent, it's not about trusting your kids. It's about getting your kids to trust your reactions to the truth, no matter what the truth is. Because if they're afraid to talk to you, believe me, as you'll hear as this video goes on, not being able to, this could have been avoided if I felt comfortable telling the truth, but I didn't, and it played out like it did. Okay, I'm going to stop blathering and get back to yesterday's conversation. A guy named Bobby bought from a guy named Mark. Mark was buying from a guy named Gary, who I met through Steve Pollock. And Bobby worked his way up to Gary from Mark. Mark was associated with a guy named John Ryan. I mean, Gary was associated with John Ryan. They were doing things together. And Bobby met John Ryan through Gary. And then one day, Gary and Bobby showed up at my house. That was November 3rd, 1975. And Gary bought 100 hits off of me in front of Bobby. And 2 days later, on November 5th, 1975, Bobby came back by himself and wanted another 100 hits. And I scolded him. I said, listen, John and Gary are my customers. You have a knee. And this is me being enabling. I said, I'm going to take care of you today, but going forward, you got to go through John and Gary because they got to make their money too. And his comment was, yeah, everybody's got to make their money. Well, he was.
I was going to say, okay.
So anyway, that's how it all happened.
So he bought from you.
Yeah. So he bought from me. So November 3rd was a lie. I didn't sell to him on November 3rd. I sold to somebody else in front of him on November 3rd. But November 5th, I put 100 hits of acid in his hand. You asked me in an email, could I have beaten it? And yeah, I could have, because all the evidence against me was destroyed in testing. So I could have fought this, but if I fought and lost, I would have gotten a minimum 8 1/3 to life. And I would have had to be locked up for 8 1/3 years before I even saw the parole board. And as much of a gambler as I am, I couldn't make that bet.
No, you said that as much, and you were right.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's too much noise for me to talk, but I was doing a little research about this law, and it was such a incredibly weird law. Everybody, first time, like somebody said, you could sell a person who had no priors could have sold an eyedropper full of cocaine and gotten sentenced for life.
Yeah, it was mandatory life sentence. No blankets. All I have is my parka, but they didn't find the cocaine in my sleeve pocket. So the longest night of my life. I mean, this was unimaginable horror for me. I'm thinking about my grandparents. In fact, on the phone with my mother, I said, I just have one request. Please don't tell grandma and grandpa. That was it would have broken their hearts. So the next day, so I spent the longest night of my life. I'm laying on a cold bench, freezing. If I took off my coat, use it for a pillow, I'd be freezing. If I kept my coat on, I'm laying on a stone cold bench. Sleeping's out of the question. And I finally fall asleep. Must have been 2 a.m. I wake up to a billy club hitting me on the foot. Wake up. I'm like, what? He goes, give me your shoelaces. They wanted to make sure I didn't hang myself, as if I wouldn't have already. So they took my shoelaces. So they put me in the in the courthouse lockup, and I'm there, and Mark is there, and Gary's there, and John is there. All the people, they swept us all up in one sweep in all these different places. And a couple of people that were unfortunately at my house that day, they got thrown in jail too. And I said to Mark, hey, are they going to strip? You know, we all knew that we're going straight to Albany County Jail after our arraignment. So I said to Mark, are they going to strip search me again? Because I'm holding some coke and they didn't find it. And he goes, hell yeah, they're going to strip search you. I'm like, oh, I better flush this. He goes, hell no, don't flush it. So we're sitting in the lockup at Albany County Courthouse, snorting coke, waiting to be arraigned.
That's
Sorry,
perfect.
Rocky, wherever you are in heaven. I
love it. That's
the last year coke with a bunch of convicts.
justice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know.
yeah. But you have Ellen here. I'd like to interview her, like how she saw you change, you know, like what happened to you. And you have so many stories.
Ellen knew
And-
me when I was still innocent. Because we met sophomore year. I'm not sure how much she saw externally what I was going through. So I'm going to turn it over to Ellen.
No, well, I mean, that's a good question, Stephanie. And I didn't have a continuum. Looking back now, trying to see what did I see. But actually, Michael was always a leader. But no, he was the center of things. Everybody went to his house. Everybody went to, yeah. Everybody was just there. First of all, he's got good energy, and
yeah.
you know, people just wanted to be around him. I think nobody. Oh, they're doing plates in the background. Nobody suspected. Probably a few people knew, but nobody knew. And I feel like we either just took him for granted or took advantage of him. That's what I think, looking back on it. And I'm sorry. I'm here to say, you know, you should have had, I don't know, better friends or something. Anyway, it was a huge shock. I was already back in Queens when December 4th happened. The trip thing I want to talk about, it's the trip that JD and I took up to Dannemora. By the way, I wanted to say, I figured out what 76D47 stands for. I'm sure you've already given this a lot of thought, Ungi. It stands for 76. It's when you entered the doors of Dannemora. D is Dannemora. And 47 is that there were 46 people before you that year, right?
Exactly.
Right.
I
Exactly.
spent a lot of time with this. He wrote me one letter where he said that he was looking at his uniform. There's also this out of body experience. And he was looking at his uniform and saying 76D47. I don't know. And suddenly it clicked in his head. I'm 76D47. And
Wow.
you know, it is so dehumanizing to be in prison. So we went up to visit and we brought a cake, and the guard slashed the cake on the way. Really actually. And we were sitting in sort of a picnic area room, big open gymnasium picnic area room. And the Ungi that was joking with the cop on December 4th is who I expected to see. And we were chatting and we were talking, and a guard comes over and says something like, "You're done. It's time." And I expected him to say, "Yeah, right. Yeah, you know, something Brooklyn." And that's not what he did. He immediately did what the officer told him to do, which I had never seen him do before. And it's like so clear to me that he was in prison.
Yeah.
It was depressing. It was depressing. I didn't never said it was depressing, but it was. And we were just, it wasn't supposed to happen this way. It was the craziest, stupid law. It's like this little piece of the law that concerned LSD had nothing to do with the purpose of the law, which was to end addiction and violent crime. And where does this fit in? And
I think this is a good time. I have a video I want to share about that law. Here's a news piece about the law, the Rockefeller Drug Law, because the whole thing of it is, it was first offender didn't matter. It was a mandatory life sentence for a Class A felony, and although the intent of the law was trying to get heroin and cocaine off the streets, the point of it is, and as Ellen's saying, this was not the intent of the law. So let me share this. and play it.
Rockefeller drug laws were considered draconian, racist, and ineffective, but they were the law of the land for 31 years. And Liz Bishop joins us now with tonight's CBS 6 Rewind. Liz.
JT, America has struggled for decades with the right way to tackle drug use in this country. Before the Just Say No era of the 80s came the strictest drug laws in the country, enacted right here in New York State. And that's my Rewind tonight. It was an unanticipated horror of the war in Vietnam. Young soldiers finding relief from the terrors of combat with stimulants and sedatives. The Pentagon reported in 1973 that 1 in 5 U.S. soldiers had a heroin habit at a time when back home, the counterculture was using drugs to turn on, tune in, and drop out. Worried about the impact this would have on America's youth, in 1971, Richard Nixon led the battle cry against what he called public enemy number one.
In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
2 years later, New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller, tinkering with the idea of running for president, jumped into the fray with both feet.
We've come to the conclusion that nothing less than a total mobilization of the community effort will suffice in meeting this problem.
On May 8th, 1973, at the state capitol in Albany, Rockefeller made history. Some say with the stroke of a pen, he ruined thousands of lives, signing into law what would forever after be known as the Rockefeller Drug Laws. Fulton County Sheriff Rich Giardino is a former judge whose job it was to adjudicate those cases. The laws filled prisons with young minority men and women arrested for possession of a small amount of drugs. He says the law did not differentiate between the violent drug user and the non-violent.
If you sold it, you're arrested, you're charged, and you're going to prison.
In a state where marijuana use and sale is now legal, it's hard to imagine that the penalty for selling 2 ounces or more or possessing 4 ounces or more of heroin, morphine, cocaine, opium, or cannabis was 15 to 25 years to life in prison, giving New York at the time the toughest drug laws in the country. While initially very popular, it soon became clear that the drug laws did not distribute punishment equally, singling out the poor and marginalized. But it was a long, slow process to undo their impact. In 1977, then Governor Hugh Carey repealed the section of the laws that applied to marijuana. In 2004, then Governor George Pataki signed the Drug Law Reform Act into law, replacing Rockefeller's iron-fisted approach to drug use and sale with a more moderate, determinate system that put a higher priority on treatment. The Pataki reforms reduced the minimum sentence for the most serious drug charge from 15 years to life to 8 to 20 years in prison. And it wasn't until legislative reforms enacted in 2009, though, that the Rockefeller drug laws were essentially dismantled once and for all.
Well, they dismantled that law a couple of years after the law dismantled me. Excuse me. Yeah, it was. So basically I had, as I mentioned earlier, I had 2 indictments, 2 sealed indictments. One was an A2 felony, one was an A3 felony. The A2 felony carried a minimum sentence of 8 1/3 to life. The A3 felony carried a minimum sentence of 1 year to life. And my thinking was, and yes, I had a path to beating the case because they had no physical evidence against me. It was all destroyed in testing. But my thinking was, it's going to be hard, but I could do a year and come out with my soul maybe close to intact. If I go in for 8 1/3 years, that's going to be what my life is. And I made the choice to plea bargain, and they said they would drop the A2 felony if I pleaded guilty to the A3 felony. I was sentenced to 1 year to life, which was really the best I could hope for with a guilty plea. So let me get back to what we recorded yesterday.
It was a completely tone-deaf law, and he got caught in it, like that big, those big nets that gather everything in the ocean.
Yeah.
And he was just caught in it, and
Wow.
it didn't happen to us. Like, it didn't happen to people who went to Albany, and it didn't happen to people, Jewish kids from Brooklyn. Of course he was going to get out. And it was the biggest shock in the world that he didn't. And I'm glad that everybody figured out that there was a way to only have it be a year. You were smart, because he had something to look forward to, getting out in a year, going to a place, a low security place in Staten Island, right? Arthur Kill.
Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, you didn't just bring me a cake. You brought me a Gateway Diners cherry cheesecake. Before I discovered Junior's cake. So so thank you, because I was very popular because I shared that cheesecake with some of my inmates. Also, I wasn't sentenced to 1 year. I was sentenced to 1 year to life.
Sentenced for life.
Which explains why I was so compliant with the guard, because I didn't want to get in any trouble whatsoever. I wanted to be paroled at exactly 1 year, which, spoiler alert, I was. But that was why you didn't see the wise ass Ungie who didn't listen to anybody in the visiting room.
That was you. Hey.
Yeah. But you'd write to me in Dannemora, and I have to tell you, after all these years, I probably told you this somewhere along the line. I honed my writing skills, writing letters to you from Dannemora.
Oh, yeah, you did mention that.
I wanted to be entertaining, and mail call was, when the guy would say mail call, my ears would just perk up. Is there a letter in your bag for me? And I have to admit this, not to say it. When I get a letter from you, because you would write really good letters, which is why I had to hone my letter writing skills, because I had to reply in a way becoming of what you wrote to me. But when I get a letter from you, I wouldn't open it. I would hold on to it for a day or two, because the whole concept of having once I read it, I'm done.
Then it was read, right? It's over.
But I had a letter to read, which gave me something to look forward to.
Right.
So I would wait, maybe not an or two, but I would definitely wait a day before opening it and reading it, and then I'd start writing it. And I have a whole shoebox full of the letters. A lot of people gave me back the letters that I sent, and I kept every letter that I received. So Arthur Kill was what I wanted to get to. Arthur Kill, that was the new minimum security facility in Staten Island, but they sent me to Raybrook instead, which was in between Saranac Lake and Lake Placid, because they were going to have the Olympics in Lake Placid in 1980, and they needed slave labor. So they moved my whole facility down to a no-wall ski chalet in between Lake Placid and Saranac Lake. And by then, I was radar. I had the job. I was sitting inside the guard cage. I was typing schedules. So I wasn't out there banging nails or building anything. And one day I went into the file and I saw my mugshot, and I just snatched it.
Please.
Yeah.
We were talking about what happened that year, and that's what I was wondering also. Like, December 4th is a date. Like, December 4th is this commemoration, but there's like, what's going to happen after? What's going to happen? What are you going to think on December 5th? What is this whole year going to look like to you? Is there going to be some kind of reflecting back? You're reflecting back, I hope, I guess. And are you coming away with it with a meaning, I guess?
What we're doing right now is part of the meaning.
Yeah.
I've told the story on the Blathercast a couple of times. You've heard it on the Blathercast. Stephanie's heard it. When I picked up that hitchhiker, that Navy guy going AWOL, running away from Vietnam in 1973. Long story short, and I said to him, if they catch you, they're going to throw you in the brig. You're going to go to prison, and it's going to be years out of your life. And he said, if I have to go to prison, I won't regard it as years out of my life. I'll regard it as years of my life, which is what inspired me while I was locked up to try to tell my story. Because if I don't tell my story, I'm just another asshole who got busted and went to prison. But if I tell my story, I'm in there having a unique experience that nobody I grew up with or know has had. And so I'm in there with eyeballs and ears, seeing things for myself that I could talk about that nobody else has experienced. So that's why I've been wanting to tell the story for many, many years. When I was locked up, aside from writing the letters to you and JD and Stromberg and Valerie, and I had a whole bunch of people who wrote to me, and I loved it. Loved all the letters that I got.
I'm good. That's right. I'm glad you got a lot of letters.
A little snippet of freedom. Visiting was bittersweet for me, by the way. I loved when people came to visit, but when they said it's over, that reality would hit me, and it would be, it was like it's like being in a dark room and getting a glimpse of light. Now it gets dark again. sometimes you're just better off having it just stay dark.
Just being in dark. How long was it? They give you an hour or a half hour? It
An
seemed like
hour,
a blink.
maybe an hour and a half, something like that. It was too short. You brought the gateway down to cheesecake, and you also brought a cassette player, which
Yes.
the guards cut the wires.
Thanks to your
on.
mother. Oh my God.
They cut the wires because you weren't allowed to have speakers. But as soon as it came in, guys I was locked up with, one guy had a welding machine, and he'd weld the wires back together, and we all had cassette players. And you brought me a Jefferson Airplane tape, and you brought me Black and Blue by the Rolling Stones.
Oh.
So I remember that visit. And once again, I blathered myself away from the point I was originally trying to make. This happens on the live stream all the time, by the way. Stephanie was wondering why I repeat myself.
Edit.
Yeah, well.
I'm just treading water. I'll say something over and over again, trying to think of what I was actually trying to say.
Right.
But like I said, what we're doing right now. Oh, so here's where I was going. So I filled all these notebooks with writing, uncopied, longhand notebooks. I got married. I'm not writing anymore. I'm starting to have kids. My ex-wife puts all my notebooks in a garbage bag and puts the garbage bag out in the garage because I'm not touching them, and it's taking up dresser space in the house. Well, the landlady had construction done on the house, and when the construction crew cleaned up, they tossed away all the garbage, including the garbage bag that had every bit of my uncopied writing in it, except for one notebook. So it was all gone. And the shroud got yanked, the bandage pulled, whatever you want to call it. Because all that time, I'm not locked up. I'm not a prisoner. I'm a storyteller, and I'm gathering information for a story, and I'm telling the story. I was able to rationalize the whole experience by saying, this is not a year to life out of my life. This is time of my life. I'm doing something positive and gathering information and writing creatively. And when it was all gone, every bit of suppressed emotion that I felt, that I managed to avoid about the whole nice Jewish Boy Scout bar mitzvah boy getting busted and going to prison, it came storming back, and I had a total nervous breakdown. I cried for like 2 days. Everything I avoided, it all came back. The landlady gave me $1,000 for my trouble.
Ellen, you said something about the December 4th is what day? It's a day of reset?
Yes,
in the Jewish.
yes.
Yeah. Well, because I look at the Jewish calendar to see what was going on with this person, what happened in his life. So it was Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh happens every month. It's the first day of the new month, but it's considered a reset for that month. And it was also Hanukkah. How come you weren't home lighting candles? You got busted on the 6th night of Hanukkah. It was, yeah. So it is a time of, it didn't happen to me. I'm only standing outside, but I see that this completely turned his life in a different direction. Completely turned his life in a different direction. And he, in my opinion, has done good things with his life. So would it have gone better if he had, been this straight guy and went back to Bensonhurst and, loafers and got on the train? No. Your life went off the wall, and it started with this. You did so many things that nobody does. And the fact that Wavy Gravy was in that movie is, you don't think that's a universe reaching out to you moment, that showing you that.
It wasn't so many years later that I realized that I found out Wavy was in that movie. I never put that, because I hadn't met Wavy at that point.
You hadn't, but it was there for you. It was like, look here. And
which movie? Actually,
it's called Cisco Pike. We got to watch that at some point.
Right.
Chris Christopherson and Gene Hackman and Karen Black.
And it's playing at the Deluxe.
Yeah. And a couple of blocks away from the house. But now thinking about it all together, because I had to get busted. If I kept going the way I was going, I probably would have been dead or something, or gotten busted much, much worse than what I was actually busted for. Yeah. I was going one-way vector in a bad direction. Everything I did made it worse. But to bring it all together, because again, I felt like a victim. I was angry about the Rockefeller drug laws.
That was horrible, stupid law.
The good outcome from this could have looked like this. getting busted. It was all about my parents not finding out. And once I got busted, my parents knew the cat was out of the bag. I should have gotten probation. Had I gotten probation, that would have stopped me without having to go to prison. So if I get a do-over, go ahead and bust me, but
Don't do that.
you know,
Don't do a do-over, no. And it was about hiding. It was about hiding, and it was about addiction.
absolutely. Anyway, so that was recorded yesterday. Again, many, many thanks to Ellen from Queens and Peach for helping me put this together. That's the story. 50 years ago. So now it's 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on December 4th, Thursday, December 4th. Students in Albany are probably cramming for their winter semester finals that'll start Monday, and that's what I was going to do as soon as I got done with all my business on December 4th. But it wasn't to be. Everything changed. I was dragged away in handcuffs, and that's what my life became for many, many months afterwards. I'll keep telling the story because there's a lot of 50 years ago todays coming up. Every year around Thanksgiving, though, I start getting the creeps because it was Thanksgiving weekend 50 years ago that I hit what I thought was rock bottom. Little did I know, a few days later, I find out what rock bottom really is. So if you're going to come away from with any of this, truth, uncomfortable truth is better than a series of lies. And once you start telling lies, the lies get bigger and bigger and bigger until you can't lie yourself out of a situation, which is exactly what happened to me. I'm glad the Rockefeller drug laws are a thing of the past. I met many, many good folks inside who were swept up in that same law, from a few ounces of weed doing felony time to a few hits of acid doing felony time to some bigger traffickers also doing felony time. We're all in there. I'll give a quick spoiler about what followed. I was on parole for 7 years. They took me off parole in 1982. I moved to California in late 1981, and they transferred my case. I was able to get permission to move to California. I had a job lined up there. That's a whole other story for another time. But I came out to California, started seeing the parole officer, and the parole officer was pissed. But he wasn't pissed at me. He was pissed at Rockefeller because I shouldn't have been on parole. I shouldn't have gone to prison. Any other time for this crime, I would have gotten probation, and probation really would have been enough. I'm not bitter. My life is excellent right now. I'd like to be 20 years younger, but what are you going to do? But, it's the butterfly effect. Everything that's happened in my life has led me to where I am now. And I am a grateful and happy person these days. And I'm especially grateful for my loyal Blatherversians, 3 of whom have sat through this entire video, crazy as you are. So that's it for now. I'll be back Tuesday talking about who knows what. But for now, the boomer has blathered. Thank you so much for watching, and I mean it.